And hello and welcome back, everyone. So, in the first video of this little collection, I went over some modifications that I feel go a long way towards fixing and improving the game of Malifaux. Now, most of those changes just affect the core rules and the way the game plays. But a couple of things that I suggest actually affect the models. And so, these additional videos, I will be going over some of the keywords and how the rules modifications will affect them. In this particular video, I'll be going over a couple of the keywords in the Arcanist faction. Although one of the suggestions that I do make is the elimination of factions. So these are more treating the masters and their keywords as completely unique and separate things. But I won't be going over the entire line of miniatures. I'm only sticking to the keywords that I know the best, and ones that I'm actually interested in continuing to play, if I decide to continue playing Malifaux. So in this video, I'll be going over Rasputina and December, Colette with the Performers, and Kaeris with Wildfire. Now, I should mention again that none of this stuff is playtested. A lot of this is just me eyeballing things and going off of my knowledge of Malifaux. So hopefully things are as close to being balanced as possible, but it does need some actual plays to kind of tweak details. But anyway. We'll kick things off with Rasputina and the December crew. Now, Rasputina required a little bit of work. Winter's Teeth ended up being the easier of the two. Essentially, it has a trigger, Spirit of Hunger, that summons a Wendigo. I just got rid of it. Couldn't really think of a decent replacement. It doesn't really need one, so just delete. The crew card as well is fine as is. So, other than the removal of the Wendigo summon trigger, it's fine. Abominable, however, required a bit more work. So the main problem here is Form from Ice. Now, there were a couple of options as far as what to do with this. Simply removing it is a bit of a problem because each master in the game is supposed to have 3 abilities or 3 actions, one of which is typically a signature. So by simply deleting this, it leaves Rasputina with only 2 actions. So probably a better idea to find something to replace this with. Now, and a couple of thoughts. The one that I kind of settled on is one that moves allies into base contact with an ice pillar and then destroys the pillar. It kind of fits with her style because Abominable Rasputina is meant to be the leader of the cannibal cult. And her whole thing is just getting into combat with your enemy. So this gives her the ability to fling allies into areas where they can make the most of their attacks. That's kind of what I went with here. The alternative would be to replace this with something that gives buffs, like adds beneficial tokens to allied models or something like that. Like shielded or something. So that is a possibility, but I kind of wanted to go with fling allied models into combat with the enemy's ability because it fits more with her style. The crew card is fine as is. So that's really the only change that needs to be made. As far as the totems go, Mara, as far as I can tell, is a new model for 4th edition. Wendigo has been around forever. It is possible to turn them both into regular models, quite simply actually. Samara. Oh, I should mention that all totems in 4th edition now have an ability that allows you to spend a soulstone in order to draw cards. With the changes that I'm suggesting being made to the game, these are no longer viable options. It's a lot better to just remove these and use the general rule that I suggested in the first video. So for all totems, these abilities that tap the ley line, resupply, and anything else, they're gone. So for Mara, the only thing that I would suggest is just giving her a cost of 8. It sets her 1 below health, which is kind of close. Normally I would set it at 2, but she has some pretty interesting abilities, some very useful abilities, even without the tap the ley line. So I kind of figure that she is worth 8. It's a bit high cost for an individual model. That's typically when you get to like henchman level, but there are some that are that expensive, like Blessed. So it puts her in the same league as those, which I think is fine. The Wendigo has a 3rd edition counterpart, so a lot of the stuff I just pulled from it. He keeps health to 6, gets a cost of 5. Now, the Wendigo is built to be resummoned. He basically just gets himself killed in order to form ice pillars and scheme markers. With the low health pool, not that hard to do. But since he no longer can be summoned, I figured it was worth giving him a trigger on his Starving Advance that actually comes from the 3rd edition version of him, where if he eats a remains marker, he can heal. Gives him a bit more survivability, but you still... I figured it was worth keeping the Demise, because again, the 3rd edition version had a similar thing. And turning him into an ice pillar or scheme marker is kind of useful. Scheme marker maybe more so than the ice pillar. So with all that kind of stuff, even though you do kind of want to get him killed, I think he is worth the 5 rather than bumping him down to a 4. As far as everything else goes, everything is kind of fine. The only things worth mentioning are the Ice Golem, which has this Frozen Creation action that summons Ice Cannon. All of the golems have an ability like this now. It is... there's in 3rd edition, the Ice Golem did have an ability that allowed him to create a little snowstorm around himself. I think it's sort of what Snowstorm does now. So I don't know if it's really worth taking that 3rd edition ability. I've just removed the Ice Game and Summons. I haven't really bothered putting any other ability back in there. It's still pretty strong. I don't know if it's 10 Soulstones strong, but it's pretty strong. Especially because it's kind of hard to kill. The other thing is Cedra. So Cedra is kind of a summoner, in that at the start of his turn, he can turn into the other version of his card. But since they're both the same cost, and because you're replacing one with the other, it's not really a summon. It doesn't add anything to the crew, or above and beyond the starting values. It's just replacing one with the other, which I think is fine. It's basically just giving some more versatility to the model. Allows him to shift from one set of stats to the other, back and forth, depending on the situation, or whether or not he needs to heal, which he does when he shifts. Or she, or it, or whatever. So yeah, I think that's fine. I think that is not... It doesn't have the problems that summons do. So I think that's okay. And technically it is a replace rather than a summon, which replaces are better than summons. In most circumstances. There are a few where you're replacing a cheap model for an expensive one, which is basically a summon that is just as bullshit. But otherwise, that is it for December. Which means that the next one is Performers. Oh, I put this into Wildfire. Oopsie. This should go in here. Not that it really matters, but whatever. Okay, Performers are next. So Colette. So this keyword is interesting in that it didn't really have any problems with summoning, but there were a couple of things that I noted that I kind of tinkered with. So first things first. Colette, the Master, and her crew cards are totally fine as is. There's no more summoning, nothing that needs to be messed with. They're okay. The totems, Angelica used to be a regular model. So converting her back was relatively simple. Again, got rid of the resupply, kept the health at 9, and gave her cost of 7. Now her cost is a little bit lower because she's not a particularly strong model. She has some interesting abilities, but I don't know. One of the things that she had in 3rd edition, one of the things that she kind of is built for is the Don't Mind Me. She's meant to be the one that kind of sneaks around and does stuff. So this kind of fits with her. Now, adding Don't Mind Me probably would bump her cost up to 8. I'm not entirely sure if this is enough for an entire Soulstone increase, but it is quite a strong ability. So I would probably say cost of 7 without Don't Mind Me, and if you're adding this, maybe bump the cost up to 8. Now, the Mechanical Dove. I tried to figure out how to turn this into a regular model. I couldn't. Essentially, it increases your hand size by having at least one of them. It heals, and it explodes. That's kind of what it does. And it summons more of itself. So the biggest problem is that its main things kill the model. Like its heal and its exploding. Which means that it's another one of these things that it's like the peons, where you're just meant to summon, you're meant to keep summoning them over and over again and just wave assault enemies with exploding mechanical doves. Or using them just to spam heals on models. This is basically just an attack disguised as a model. So I couldn't really figure out any way of being able to make it work without just having to blank everything and rewrite the entire thing. So I figured the best way to use these is actually not as a model at all, but instead to use them as decoy markers. So my suggestion is use the mechanical doves as the decoys. Now there's only 3 of them, so you will need to find 2 extras. You can either just use regular tokens or get a couple extra mechanical doves. If you are fortunate enough to have the Dark Carnival set, then you can use some flying monkeys in addition, and that will give you the 5. Otherwise, yeah, kind of pointless as a model, much more useful as a decoy marker. The other thing is... okay, so one of the things that you'll notice is that there is no more mannequins. They were removed for 4th edition, sort of. But the Choreography are still here, and these used to be a really strong set of models. You can shift them back and forth between the Duet, which had both miniatures on one base, to individual Choreography, where it was 1 per base. And they could shift back and forth. It was really kind of neat, and with their abilities to be able to move around and move out of combat, and their really heavy-duty attacks, they were very good at being the whole dancing, whirling blades of death. In 4th edition, not so much. The Corfi duet only breaks apart when it dies, and it just spawns 2 Corfi. So rather than doing the whole replace thing like with Cedra, it literally just, it dies and it summons 2 Corfi. The Corfi are not the Whirling Blades of Death that they used to be. In fact, these stats and special abilities, like Take the Hit, they are mannequins. These are mannequins just given the name of Corfi. So my suggestion is to use them as such. These are just the new mannequins. The stats are basically the same, probably reduce the base size to 30mm, but otherwise, if you have mannequins, you can just use them as Corfi in 4th edition. For the duet, get rid of the demise ability, keep them as 2 miniatures on 1 base. There are plenty of examples in Malifaux of that. Tons of stuff is represented by having multiple miniatures on a single base. They don't break apart. They don't do the whole split and reform thing. So, yeah, get rid of that. But otherwise, the model's basically the same. And next up is Wildfire. Now, Wildfire used to be one of the smallest keywords in the game. But in 4th edition, she has absorbed all of Rammus's old machinery, which has made her into one of the biggest keywords in the game. And look at this is incredible. But her, the 2 different versions of her represent the 2 halves of her keyword. There's the original version, which is based on the Fire Cult, and there's the new one, which is Machinery. The Fire one, Kaeris Reborn, is totally fine as is. No real summons, nothing needs to be taken a look at. Iron Threaded, however, is a bit more of a problem. So one of the things that, in fact, several models in the keyword have gained is the ability to summon steam arachnids. A few of them have this Summon the Swarm ability. Or, no, for others it's called Arcanist Cache. So the Firestarter and Howard Langston, Firestarter and Howard Langston have a similar ability, except that it's a trigger rather than an actual action. So for these guys, Firestarter and Howard Langston, I just say get rid of Arcanist Cache. It doesn't need to be there. Goodbye. So long. For Kaeris, however, Summon the Swarm is one of her actions. Now, she still has 3, so normally that would be fine, but Summon is her signature action, which is a bit more of a problem. Because each master should have one ability that's a signature. I don't know if it's a good idea to turn Overclock into a signature action, so instead, trying to find something to replace this with. I had a look at some of the other models that are more machinery-based, or some of the other masters, I should say, they're more machinery-based. And I managed to find one ability that could work. This is something that is taken off of Mai Feng, who is a master in the Ten Thunders faction. Since I'm not really going to be doing Ten Thunders, I figure copying her ability is totally fine. Oops. So rather than Summon the Swarm, signature ability, Forged of Steel. It's just a ally only, target gains a bolster token, and for a tome you get Fortify, target gains a shield token. So it's just a little buff. If that's too much, then I'd say just get rid of the Fortify and keep the bolstered, or maybe keep the shielded and get rid of the bolstered or whatever. But, so yeah, just quick and simple little buff. As for the crew card, there are 2 problems with this. Frantic Triage and Burst the Core. Frantic Triage is to summon Steam Arachnids, and Burst the Core is to explode Steam Arachnids. Now, my suggestion is to remove Frantic Triage completely and modify Burst the Core. Basically just getting rid of the thing where it kills the model and have it inflict damage instead. Now, this is quite a bit better than this, because if you kill the target, then you cannot continue to spam this ability off of it. It's no longer there. There's nothing to spam this ability off of. Whereas if you're simply doing damage, then the model that you're doing damage to won't just immediately go away, unless somehow you actually do enough damage to kill it. So you could potentially use Burst the Core on the same model multiple times. Because of that, I did drop it down to a regular action, so it's not a signature. I made it a once per turn, so a model can only ever do it once. Only affects friendly constructs, which is a bit more broader than only on Steam Arachnids, but again, whatever. So I figure even though this is a bit better, it makes up for the fact that you're getting rid of both Triage, Frantic Triage, and the regular version of Burst the Core. So I kind of think this works. Not 100% certain, but it should be a decent replacement, I believe. So for totems, Irby is the new one. It's basically a lava-filled mechanical wasp type thing, which looks really cool. It has some interesting abilities. It makes for a really interesting individual, unique model. So keeping that. As far as the Eternal Flame goes, it's not as good. It's a bit more simplistic. It's going to lose some of its abilities to make it even worse. And the model itself, the new model, I'm not fond of. I really liked what it looked like before, when it was that six-legged insect machine thing. Now, I think it just looks like a giant metal torch. Whoop-de-doo. Oh, actually. Yeah, so this thing looks really cool. I like this. The new version of it, though, really sucks. So, yeah. And yeah, as far as abilities and stuff go, I don't know. I don't think this is kind of worth having. So my gut instinct is telling me to just get rid of Eternal Flame entirely. But for both of them, I guess if you do want to keep the Eternal Flame, the modifications are quite simple. Because everybody doesn't have a 3rd edition version, there's nothing to compare it to, so it's based off of the 4th edition version. And I know that each totem, or most of the totems, have 9 health. That's just kind of a standard thing, but whatever. Keep it at 9 health. Remove Tap the Ley Line. Gave it a cost of 7. I don't know if that's going to be too cheap, considering what it can do. It's got some decent abilities, and it has quite a lot of stuff. And like Breath of Fire is quite nice. Thermite Injection with Onslaught is scary. And Living Spark is quite useful. So I don't know, maybe it should be bumped up to an 8. But I don't know if he's an 8 Stone model. I think maybe. The Eternal Flame. Drop the health down to 5. Give it a cost of 4. But even that seems expensive for it. Might even drop that down to a 3. And yeah, get rid of Spawn Steam Arachnid. And tap the Ley Line. So yeah, considering it would only keep Flame Blast and Backdraft, it might not even be worth 4 at that point. The front of card abilities are still pretty decent. So, I don't know. But then I'm kind of just leaning towards getting rid of it entirely. The only other thing to take a... Oh no, there's a couple of things. Okay, so one other thing to take a look at is the Fire Golem. So just like with Icy, he has Fiery Creation, allows him to summon Fire Gammon, just get rid of it. I can't remember what the 3rd edition version of this had, but again, whatever. I think just removing this is fine. Pretty much everything else is fine as is. The only other thing that I really took a look at was the Steam Arachnid. So this is a peon, which again is more just a summon for 5 seconds until it kills itself kind of model. It's not great, it is just summon fodder. As individual Steam Arachnids, these things are not impressive. They're kind of pointless to have as individual models. However, back in 3rd edition, it was possible, in previous editions, it was possible to get these guys in swarms. And a swarm of Steam Arachnids is a lot scarier. So again, just like with the Corfi Duet, there are models in this game that come multiple miniatures to a base and represent much weaker things that are only really a threat when used in groups. Malifaux does not do hordes very well. Putting down lots of shitty models just doesn't really do anything for the game. It just slows things down. It doesn't work very well, and it was the reason why the whole pass mechanic thing was created. So anyway, things like the Gaiman are probably the weakest that I would include in the game. So for something like a Steam Arachnid, I don't know, it might be possible to bump it up to Gammon level, but honestly, I think the swarms are just a much better idea. So rather than having just the one, using the 3rd edition version as inspiration, here's my suggestion for the Steam Arachnid Swarm. Have it as a minion 2. Give it a cost of 8 with 9 health. The stats are pretty much the same as what the Steam Arachnid has, but 1 extra willpower. The front of card abilities are the same, but it gains armor, just to represent that there are multiple of them, and because most of the other bigger machines have armor. The Flaming Pincer gets a rework. So other swarm models, for example the Gups, I think, from Neverborn, have this thing where if the model has half its maximum health or more, the attack has a raised value of 3 rather than 5. This is a great way to represent a group of opponents that when they take damage, they start to reduce in number and become less effective. Really good kind of swarm ability. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same. Target gains a burning token. Oh, I did replace, so get rid of the Tome's automatic trigger and instead give it Mask Onslaught and Tome's You're Coming With Me, which moves the target 3 inches, and then the model can be placed in base contact with it. Loyal to the End is gone, and is replaced with Devouring Swarm, which is the ability from the Rat King from the Plague keyword. Which is basically just target a marker within 3 inches and eat it. Base size is increased to 50mm, and that's basically that. Okay, so as a little bit extra, each faction got one of these little mini keywords. So for the Arcanists, it is the Watchman, which are these cool little geary clockwork people. They're interesting looking miniatures. I think they look quite good. So these, the mini keywords are only about half the size of a regular crew. They're like 21 soulstones or something. They don't have any alternative models, so you just play with what you have. They're led by a henchman rather than a master. But they're meant to be quick and simple. You just stick them on the table and you play a game. They're good if you're wanting to do quicker games without a lot of the extra complications. So there's no summoning, there's no totems, there's no extra stuff like that to worry about. You just play with this. Now there are meant to be 2 gearlings that come in pairs. So yeah, these are kind of cool to include. You're not going to get a full crew out of these, but they're fine as is. So use them if you wish. But otherwise, yeah, that is it for the Arcanists. Kind of really quick run through. But yeah, I'll be going over some keywords from the other factions and other videos, so if you're interested in checking those out, more than welcome to. But regardless, if you haven't seen the first video yet, I would very much recommend it. It would help you understand the stuff that I'm doing here a lot better, and it'll show you some of the other rules changes and things that I'm planning to do as well. But otherwise, I think that about wraps things up. So, thank you all for watching, and hopefully I will see you again in the other videos.